Hello, I'm Oliver Colling, and this is my 70s TV childhood. Welcome back to my 70s TV childhood. We don't win any points for a snazzy title for our podcast, as it does exactly what it says on the tin. We are a podcast celebrating what it was like to be a child in 1970s Britain, and the special place that television occupied in our and our society's lives back then. It was a unique time, a special time for me, and I suspect for many of you listening, as it was the time of our happy, carefree times of childhood. And whilst we might have been playing out with our friends, then rushing home to watch Scooby-Doo, our parents and lots of others were having to deal with the realities of our country's economic decline. The 3-day week and go to work dressed in shades of brown, beige and orange. But unifying us all was the television. There wasn't much of it. Some of it wasn't actually that good. But what it did do was provide a common thread for our society and allowed us to escape from reality, if only for a short time. Many thanks, as always, for those who've been in touch with us to share your thoughts and memories. Particular thanks to Samantha, who got in touch and asked if I was the same Oliver who was the vicar's son at Padgate Church of England Primary School. Well, yes, Samantha, one and the same. It's nice to hear that you remember my father, and even nicer that you remember me. If you do want to get in touch, you can do so in a number of ways. Leave a comment on our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com, or on our Facebook, Twitter/X, YouTube, or LinkedIn sites. You can also email oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. I would like to say a special thank you to all of our new listeners, or should that be viewers, on our YouTube channel, where the number of you choosing to listen there is going through the roof, and levels of engagement are growing rapidly. This has also led to a dilemma, and I do need your help with this. Should we start producing more true video content for the podcast, or is it better that we solely focus on audio? Do let me have your views on this, as I'd love to know what you think. Anyway, now on with today's episode. I was staying in a hotel for work last week, as I quite often do, and after a hard day's toil, settled down and flicked through the dozens of channels that you now have available via digital TV. It was, I have to say, mostly rubbish, although I do have a secret liking for the reality show Police Interceptors, which is probably my guilty secret as far as TV watching goes. I'm always so impressed by how professional the interceptors are, as they take on probably the most stupid criminals in the country. But anyway, that's not what got me thinking about today's episode. I did stumble onto ITV2, which was showing repeats of this year's Britain's Got Talent, which I've always thought was stretching it a bit as a title. I was going to flick on past the show, but I fell into the trap of watching for a little bit and was bombarded by deluded people who think they can sing, comedians who don't actually raise a smile, and a number of, well, bizarre acts with animals. Oh, hang on. I should rephrase that probably. A number of slightly strange animal performance acts. Does that sound better? Not much. Anyway, add to that the smirking judges and the interjections of Ant and Dec, and suddenly you've lost 20 to 30 minutes of your life that you're never going to get back again. Now, it may sound like I'm being a bit of a TV snob here, as the show is insanely popular. But it is a bit like torture for me, as a middle-aged man, to watch this programme. I would guess that the show is very popular with families, and especially those with younger children, who love all of the silly acts and the theatrical judging. I'm sure they also love shows like the absolutely bonkers Masked Singer, where, if you haven't seen it, celebrities sing dressed in big costumes, as, using this year's show as an example, a pufferfish, a spaghetti bolognese, a bear, a wolf, or a dressed crab. Whenever a singer is eliminated, the crowd chant, take it off, until the loser is revealed as somebody like Marty Pellow or, and I'm not making this up, Sir Mo Farah. Seriously, I am not making this up. But I shouldn't complain too much, as none of this is new. When I was 7 or 8, I used to look forward to Monday nights just after tea, and before Coronation Street, where the finest talent known to the UK was put through its paces by a suave Canadian in a shiny suit.
A great talent show where you're the expected stars you saw. The Main Avenue Jazz Band, Tammy St. John, The Mayans, Bob Landa, Backstreet, and Jerry Shore. Stay tuned and find out which actors won this week on your Opportunity No.
And here he is, Mr. Star Maker himself, your host, Hughie Green.
Thank you tremendously. And I would like to say thank you to everybody who has been kind and gracious enough to send along all those wonderful birthday cards to me. I'm 58. I feel like 108, but I'm actually 58, and bless your hearts. And for those of you who wrote in and said good luck on retiring, I'd like to clear a little thing up. I'm not retiring. I can't afford to.
Yes, in a time when collars were wider, hair was longer, and channels were strictly analogue. If you wanted to find fame, you didn't go viral. You went on ITV on a Monday, told your family, friends, and the local paper to tune in, and prayed that Hughie Green liked your act enough to say, "I mean that most sincerely, folks." Opportunity Knocks originally began on BBC Radio way back in 1949, but it truly became a household name in the TV age. By the time it landed on ITV in 1964, it was a sensation, and by the time I started watching in the 1970s, it had become a treasured national institution. To take you back, or to give you some idea of what the show was like if you don't remember it, just picture the scene. You had a live audience, variety acts ranging from crooners to, well, contortionists, and you, the viewer at home, deciding who should win. Not with a text or an app. Oh no. You wrote in. With a pen. On a postcard. It was all refreshingly under your control, directed by the unique talents of Hughie Green. But having said that, the studio audience played its part too, and their contribution was to clap, shout, scream, in direct proportion as to how much they liked the act. This was then recorded on the bottom of the screen by the fantastic, or so it seemed to me as a child, Clapometer. The Clapometer was a great leveller. It didn't matter how talented you were. If you didn't get the crowd clapping, shouting and screaming like they'd just seen the Beatles riding on a unicorn, you were in trouble, even before the nation got its postcards out of the drawer. Now, was the Clapometer scientific? Not even remotely. It seemed to measure volume and enthusiasm and possibly vibes. Some say it was rigged, others say it was powered by sheer will and the sound guy's lunchbox. But one thing's certain, it added drama. And the studio audience and we at home loved it, and that drama that it brought. There's something oddly British about a prop device that decides your fate based on applause, isn't there? I remember having arguments at home in our family that the Clapometer wasn't very accurate in recording the strongest responses. How naive we all were. But I suppose we were all part of a nation which believed what the public information films told us, that the TV detector van could tell us which room we were in and what TV show we were watching too.
Yes, there's a TV set on at number 5. It's in the front room. And they're watching Columbo.
If you don't have a TV license, it won't take us long to find you.
So what happened on the show itself? Do you remember? Let's start with the set. Now, if you watch old clips from Opportunity Knocks, and there aren't many of those around, one thing is obvious. The budget was, well, shall we say, conservative. Generous if you're a Blue Peter prop cupboard, but otherwise pretty conservative. We're talking thick carpet in beige, obviously the official colour of 1970s cool, gold curtains that possibly violated fire regulations, and a revolving stage platform that made more people dizzy than a bottle of Baby Sham. The acts were rotated onto the stage so they didn't exceed their prescribed 2 to 3 minute slots. But here's the charm about it. It worked. It didn't need to look like The Masked Singer. It needed a microphone, Hughie Green, and enough room for a choir of pensioners from Swindon to perform a medley of Vera Lynn songs. The set was famously designed for speed, so acts were shuffled on and off with near military precision. There were no commercial breaks to hide behind. It was live or pre-recorded, but always tight. The show was produced by ATV and then later Thames Television, and it ran like a well-oiled machine. Stage managers and warm-up acts kept the crowd chipper between takes, and Hughie Green was involved in absolutely everything: script, set list, and lighting. He even once allegedly demanded a change to the audience seating because it looked visually unsympathetic. Legend also has it that Green would rehearse acts personally, offering feedback like, "You're not just singing, you're selling a dream, kid," which is terrifying when delivered by a man in a sharp suit, smoking a cigar and speaking with a Canadian accent. And while the format looked spontaneous, it was anything but. Every move, every cue, every wink from Hughie planned to within an inch of its polyester life. We'll talk about Hughie a bit more later, but what of the talent that was on display on the show? There was a huge range of performers on the show, and almost every possible means of entertainment was featured. I remember in my hometown of Warrington in the northwest of England, we had a local act perform on the show in, I think it was about 1975, the Warrington Youth Band, which was a brass band run by a local musician, Len Andrews, which created the opportunity for young people to learn to play a musical instrument and then to travel with the band on concert tours both nationally and internationally. Len and the band were well known in the town, and when the word got out they were going to be on Opportunity Knocks, a state of near hysteria gripped the population of Warrington. Our local newspaper, the Warrington Guardian, was full of news about their forthcoming TV appearance, and when they did appear, they almost broke the Clapometer with the level of applause they gained on the show. That was then followed by a huge postal vote, no doubt many of the postcard votes coming from the Warrington postcode, which led to Hughie announcing them as winners on the next Monday's show. That in itself propelled the band into what passed for mega-stardom in mid-70s Warrington, and they became hugely popular. I also remember they won for 3 or 4 weeks, including the last show of one series, which meant they came back at the start of the next series to defend their crown. It all sounds very innocent now, but what that did show was that being on the show could give a huge boost to an act and potentially be a life-changing experience. So who do you remember being on the show, apart from the Warrington Youth Band, of course? Firstly, let's look back at some of the big winners on the show. Who are the people who trod that beige carpet, revolving stage, and emerged as national treasures? First up, and it's pint-sized powerhouse Lena Zavaroni. In 1974, a tiny Scottish girl with a voice like a foghorn, dipped in honey, belted out, "Ma, he's making eyes at me," and the UK lost its collective mind. Lena Zavaroni was just 10. 10! And she had lungs like Shirley Bassey in a wind tunnel. She became the youngest person to have an album in the UK top 10. Not too shabby. She even ended up performing at the White House for President Ford. Not bad for a lass from Rossi. But fame at that age is a double-edged microphone. And for Lena, the pressure, the image expectations, and the spotlight took a toll. She battled anorexia from her teens, and despite attempts to revive her career, her health suffered. Tragically, she passed away in 1999 at the age of only 35. It's a sobering reminder that even the brightest talent needs protection, not just promotion. But for a short time in the 70s, Lena was Opportunity Knox's golden girl. And then came Peters and Lee.
I'm so alone, my love, without you. You're part of everything I do. When you come back and you're beside me, these are the words I'll say to you.
Lenny Peters, blind from a young age, and Diane Lee with a voice like velvet. They weren't just winners, they were instant stars. Their debut single, Welcome Home, went straight to number 1 in 1973. It was the sort of song that everyone's grandma had. They themselves were everywhere, and let's be honest, a duet never looked more awkwardly wholesome. They were the kind of act your mum adored, and your gran, probably your dog as well. But we mustn't forget that not all the winners were singers.
Oh, I wish I looked after me teeth and spotted the dangers beneath, or the toffees I chewed and the sweet sticky food. Oh, I wish I'd looked after me teeth.
Enter Pam Ayres, the gently cheeky poet from Oxfordshire, who showed up with her nasal delivery and rhyming couplets and stole the nation's heart. She brought poetry to the people, and suddenly half the country was reciting, I wish I'd looked after me teeth. And dentists across Britain wept into their fluoride with joy at the hidden message. And she's still going strong, considering outlasting Hughie and the Clapometer. And what about the man who dominated the 70s opportunity knock scoreboard, Bernie Flint? He holds the record for most successes on the show with 12 consecutive wins in 1977. That's 3 months of viewers writing him their postcards by the thousands to vote for him. Bernie had the lot. Guitar, soft vocals, and a few good tunes. He released a string of singles, had some chart success, and then presented TV shows in the 80s like Pop Gospel and Mooncat and Co., a classic if you were about 6 and awake at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. These days, apparently, Bernie still gigs, but lives a quiet life. But for a few months in 1977, he was Britain's undisputed king of the Clapometer. I'm sure you can all remember lots more of the winners like Little and Large, Paper Lace and Bonnie Langford. But there is a huge list of those who didn't get enough postcards from the general public to win, and that list has got some very interesting names on it. Take Les Dawson, for example, the man with the mournful face and the piano skills of a drunk elephant. He's rejected by the viewers on Opportunity Knocks. Madness, of course. He then went on to become one of Britain's greatest and most loved comedians. And then there's Sue Pollard, who didn't go on to become one of Britain's greatest and most loved comedians, but they had a great career. And Sue, as she's often said since, she lost to a singing dog. Yes, a dog. To be fair, it was a pretty decent dog, but even so. Others who appeared on the show but didn't win, and then went on to greater things, include Freddie Starr, Royston Vasey, later known as Roy Chubby Brown, and Paul Daniels, who came second on the show, but was spotted by TV execs as a result. And that was true for many of the performers. There were also quite a few rather odd winners, which probably says more about the British psyche than anything else, I guess. I seem to remember there was a singing nun, a bit like the famous Belgian one, but I think from memory she was from Yorkshire, and sang Bridge Over Troubled Water. Hughie Green was reportedly baffled, but the audience was enchanted. She didn't win, but she did land a guest spot on Songs of Praise as a result, and apparently became a minor celebrity in the Catholic folk scene, which is a real thing, apparently. And then, let's go back to Sue Pollard's experience with the famous singing dog. Jack, the howling hound, became infamous after howling in time with his owner's rendition of Danny Boy. He won the show, much to the horror of every human singer in the episode. There were complaints, actual letters sent in to the show as a result. Hughie Green defended the dog on air, saying, "The people have spoken, and apparently they like barking." Unfortunately, lots of the bizarre acts are lost in the mists of time. I have memories of old men playing spoons, a truly awful mime artist who seemed to be doing a parody of Marcel Marceau, and countless rather talentless children who were convinced, or perhaps their parents were convinced, that they would all be the next Lena Zavaroni or Bonnie Langford. So I suppose possibly not that different to Britain's Got Talent after all. As the 70s went on, I think, like so many other shows, Opportunity Knocks ran out of steam, and the format became a little tired. It also had more competition for the likes of New Faces, which started to point the way to the formats we have now, where celebrity judges began to hold sway. New Faces was first shown in 1973 on ATV, and it was created to be the cheeky, younger-focused answer to Opportunity Knocks. So while Opportunity Knocks had postal votes and Hughie's heartfelt sincerity, New Faces said, hang on, let's have judges. Let's do scores. Let's make it a bit more showbiz gladiator arena. And so each week, new acts would perform and be scored out of 10 by a panel of industry experts. The fundamental clash between Opportunity Knocks and New Faces, I think, came down to this. Opportunity Knocks, let the people decide. Democracy. Postcards. A nation votes with stamps. Whereas New Faces, let the industry experts decide. We'll do that on merit. We'll look at expertise. And we'll look at who will make the most money for us in the industry. Each had its charm. Opportunity Knocks felt like an informal talent show in the school hall, whereas New Faces was more like an audition in front of your really strict teacher who would always find fault with something you did. Now, apparently, behind the scenes, there was a bit of needle between the producers of the shows. Hughie Green reportedly loathed New Faces. He felt it copied Opportunity Knocks, but took the heart out of it. He didn't care for judges. He thought the scoring was cold and clinical, and he considered himself to be the real champion of the people. Which leads us on to just thinking a bit more about Hughie himself. Now, he wasn't everyone's cup of tea. His catchphrase, I mean that most sincerely, folks, was both beloved and relentlessly mocked in the UK at the time. But here's the thing. Hughie Green believed in the power of ordinary people. He saw the talent in Britain's front rooms. And in a way, he did lay the groundwork for every show from The Voice to Britain's Got Talent. In his later years, Hughie tried to be more political, famously making some slightly controversial remarks during broadcasts. But love him or raise your eyebrows at him, he was Mr. Opportunity Knocks. Off-screen, Hughie was a complicated man. But on screen, he was polished, charming, and very sincere. A bit more complex off-screen. Today, lots of people remember him as the father of Paula Yates, who only learned that former Stars on Sunday presenter Jess Yates wasn't her father after Hughie Green's death. He was also a perfectionist, a showman, and by many accounts, a bit of a nightmare to work with. He had final say on everything in the show, from camera angles to contestants' wardrobes. There are tales of his storming off set, demanding last-minute edits of the show, and clashing with producers over artistic integrity. I mean, this was a show with singing dogs, mime acts and spoon players, but to be fair to the man, he took it all very, very seriously. By the late 1970s, Hugh began using the show and his personal platform to push certain of his own political views. He once famously closed an episode with a monologue that veered straight into, blimey, is this question time now? It didn't go down well with ITV bosses, or the viewers. Eventually, the powers that be felt the show needed a change, and so the late 1970s Opportunity Knocks was, well, knocked off. In the end, Opportunity Knocks wasn't just a talent show, it was a social ritual. Families gathered round on Monday nights. The telly was still warm from Crossroads, the evening news, and Hughie Green's voice floated in like your uncle who knew everyone and didn't stop talking. It gave a chance to the untrained, the unusual, and the unexpectedly brilliant. And though TV moved on, for the likes of New Faces and then into Stars in Their Eyes, Pop Idol, that central idea remains. Anyone from anywhere with enough heart could win over the nation. All they needed was, well, opportunity to come knocking. The show created moments of magic. It gave a platform to the unpolished, the peculiar, and the precociously talented. But by the late 70s, television had changed. Audiences were craving slicker production, faster formats, and fewer dog acts, although they were to have their moments in the future. New shows like New Faces, and later things like The Big Time, were a bit slicker, and a bit less innocent, to be honest. And then we had the juggernauts of the 80s, 90s and beyond, like Stars in Their Eyes, Pop Idol, X Factor, and of course Britain's Got Talent, which probably owes the largest debt to Opportunity Knocks. When I was thinking about the show for this edition of the podcast, I thought I'd see whatever happened to the Warrington Youth Band after their national moment of fame. The good news is that the band still exists, although Len Andrews sadly passed away in his 90s in 2013. The band was renamed Warrington Brass in 1998 to reflect the fact that the average age of the band had increased, and not as many young people wanted to play in a brass band, which is a shame, although I am pleased to see that all that writing of postcards we didn't go to waste, and it's helped them leave a long legacy. And I mean that most sincerely. What memories do you have of Hughie Green and Opportunity Knocks? Do let us know by getting in touch via the various ways I mentioned earlier. Contact details are also in the show notes to this podcast. Well, that's all for now. Join us again next week for our next 70s TV trivia themed quiz, and again in a fortnight for the next episode of the podcast. In the meantime, take care, look after those you love, and join us again soon for more from my 70s TV childhood.